done it. Okay, so I can see that we're recording, and I kind of like seeing all your names and faces. Hi from South Dakota, Ali. So I'm in Switzerland, and that's why the light is kind of strange, because I've got all the house lights on so that you can see my face. And I'm really delighted. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and join this session tonight. The keynote was so inspiring, and I was just sharing with Tiffany what a fantastic, interesting discussion, and so heartwarming to hear all of that was being said, because it just means that we're a constellation of doers and movers and shakers, making a difference wherever we are in the world, step by step, and that's super important. Okay, so this session is called Imagining New Futures, Libraries at the Heart of Climate Action. And so I am going to be exploring that with you today, and fantastically that follows on beautifully from the keynote. So I'm going to, if you bear with me, just share my screen and hopefully pick up the right one. Of course. Okay, so Tiffany, can you see a screen that says Elaine, that has got the slide on it?
Yes, I see your slide.
Okay, so let me get rid of my emails. They don't come in. Okay, so great. So this is the welcome slide, and I'm in an EdTech platform that I use, which is all librarians would love, because it's all about concept thinking, and it works on a sort of mind map thing. So it looks like slides, but actually it's an EdTech platform. So welcome. I am Elaine France, the founder of Flow in Action, and this is what we're talking about today. You can use the chat, of course, and the hashtags to use if you're tweeting are Library 2020 and Sustainability in Libraries. Yes, I've started the recording, so I think everyone is happy, and thank you to San Jose State University, and from which lovely Tiffany, who's helping me, is from. And I think it's really important that there's been that support and sponsorship. Okay, so I've put a learning goal for this session, but I really, it's not going to be like school. It's going to be more like what we do in libraries. So really exploring how libraries can use futures thinking sessions to capacity build community skills for taking action. So we're going to explore that, we're going to understand some stuff, and I'd love you to leave with an understanding of how to engage your community using a futures thinking, and really understanding how that process can help you build the resilience and well-being of that community. Okay, so as we all know, libraries sit at the heart of our communities, and imagining the futures that we want, imagining new futures that we want for flourishing communities and a flourishing planet, is critical to actually unfolding them. So libraries sit in this heart, or at the heart of this process of imagination. It sits at the heart of communities, and they sit at the heart of, therefore, climate action, because public libraries, school libraries, academic libraries, it's this information literacy, it's this enabling space, not just through social infrastructure, but with the resources that connect people to wonder, and wonder as a tool for wondering and looking at nature, looking at each other through this lens of wonder, so that we are curious and inquisitive. We imagine, and I think most importantly, libraries are this space where people find their creativity and they find their voices reflected. So libraries effect this sort of domino trigger where people, through informal education, are able to find themselves, are able to better their lives wherever they are in the world. So with libraries sitting at the heart of communities with these resources, with universal access, this is the powerful lever for unfolding what we call equitable futures on a flourishing planet. We create culture of innovation by allowing people to research, allowing them to find stuff, allowing them to find answers. So I'm going to frame all of that today and lead you through the session. And let me introduce myself some more. So I, as I say, am based in Switzerland. And the work I do through Flow in Action is I train and I empower youth and the stakeholders around youth as a new generation of innovators and entrepreneurs, taking action for equitable futures, taking action for the planet. So my first professional discipline is as a librarian. I qualified 25 years ago in Liverpool in the UK, and that became for me a springboard very quickly into an unconventional career in social change, working in NGOs, working in the UK public sector, in fundraising, in strategy, in innovation, in making the world a better place. What was really key to that, key to the career that I've had, is that I took the core principles with me from librarianship into that 25-year career. And that really aligns with one of the core themes of this conference, which is around libraries as conveners and connectors for community efficacy, this role that libraries have in building resilience. So those principles that I was able to take with me were around connecting people to their imagination and creativity. And actually that is from positive psychology. Those things are the key triggers in a way, or key players in building resilience, generating positive emotions through problem solving, providing a connection through this creativity to problems that you want to solve, and being able to find the answers. So the second principle is that I was able to take from librarianship is we teach people to find answers so that they can therefore always find answers for themselves by asking for help or by navigating resources. And when you can find answers for yourself, you own your journey. And so much of the world that we're living in, that journey is about finding a way to that equitable future, finding a way for a flourishing life where you thrive and you're happy and you are well and you have access to economic empowerment as well. So the tools that come also that are related to imagination and creativity are when you're playing with ideas, when you're wondering, are design thinking and systems thinking, thinking across systems in order to do things differently. So these are really essential 21st century skills. And the third principle for me from librarianship was around amplifying voices. When you connect people to their individual voices as problem solvers, being able to find answers, being able to imagine new ways that they can live and new wonders, then you give them the tools to find answers and you are amplifying the voices of a community. So if you make that space for them to explore, that's what will happen. And that's really important because the work I do in social change is about amplifying the voices, particularly of youth, and particularly the youth of women and disadvantaged people, because this is our time. This is a time for equity and equitable futures. So I work now bringing those principles, continue to bring those principles into my career. I work as a consultant, trainer, coach, and keynote, and I continue to work with the UN on youth entrepreneurship, and I work with some libraries in the UK. I particularly work with youth doing innovation challenges and through futures thinking. Okay, so this is the bit that I really want to kind of pull together quickly. Is libraries sit at the heart of communities and climate action, and this little graphic that you're seeing is called the 4 pillars of sustainability. Now, this actually enhances what's called the triple bottom line. So the triple bottom line is social, economic, environmental. They're the factors. How can we work as businesses, as organizations, to put those things in place in order that we make life better for people? Now, with those things in mind, the guy who invented the triple bottom line, or coined the phrase the triple bottom line many years ago, John Elkington, did a management recall on the triple bottom line back in 2018. And he did a management recall because he said there's something missing. And the thing that is missing is this other pillar, the human pillar. And what he meant by that was human well-being, because the triple bottom line was invented for business originally. And he was saying business is not taking into account the impact of their actions on the environment, on the economy, on social infrastructure, and they're not taking into account what they're doing for humans and human well-being. And they're all interconnected, they're all interdependent. So when we think of, I think it becomes really central to what libraries do when they sit in the heart of communities. The social infrastructure that libraries bring to the table actually enables human well-being. It enables resilience through imagination, through creativity, and it also affects our access to resources which create economic well-being and allow us to think about environmentally sound practices, and at the same time libraries themselves as organizations can effect these things for themselves as an organization. So the sustainability certification is about these things, but it's this bigger picture for what happens, the kind of ripple effect across the community when you look through the lens of all 4 pillars. This is exactly the business proposition and the rationale for libraries. So for me, it's hugely powerful, and it connects. One of the speakers mentioned the happiness indices, and connecting to the happiness indices, and that's also really important, because when we connect to not just the happiness indices, but the well-being indices, what we see are human well-being is directly attached to planetary well-being. When our community the air is clean, we are surrounded by nature, we are regreening cities, we see different health and well-being outcomes for people. So,
Oh, Elaine?
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. I just see a question in the chat. There is a question from Monica, and she was asking, how is the human pillar different from the social pillar?
Great question. Excellent question. Thank you. So the social pillar is very much around infrastructure. It's around access to buildings, access to schools. How do you get there, etc. How do you access into culture and into society? So it's both building infrastructure that allows socializing, as well as the culture of a society. The human pillar is about human well-being and flourishing. So what decision do you take as an organization, as a business, which also you have to really think through, well, if I do that, what will be the well-being outcome for that community? Will they flourish in the long term, or am I actually going to crash into what will happen for youth, for example? So I hope that makes sense, and it hopefully makes sense. If it doesn't, keep pinging me till it does. Okay, so with that, Paul, that's a great question, because that's a segue into this element, which is around these are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So when you think about human well-being and planetary well-being go hand in hand. You don't get one without the other, in effect. So it becomes a virtuous circle. And so you have to think, when you're designing systems, when you're designing businesses, when you're designing organizations, whatever the level, that you are thinking about the impact across a system, across a community. And it's the same thing in effect with the UN SDGs, these 17 goals. They are like a jigsaw, and you pick whichever one you pick is connected to all of the others. So I think what is super important, and where we're at now, particularly because of COVID, is if we concentrate on getting kids back to school or accessing informal learning spaces, we will actually create a domino effect across the other SDGs, because COVID has created a tipping point for us to reevaluate what's happening in our libraries, in providing education, in understanding what's happening across the climate, and how we can affect changes. So I think libraries provide the access to the resources that help us to innovate, help us to imagine, help us to research, and help us to have ideas about how we can fix all of these goals. And in fact, we're starting from that education one and kind of rippling out across the others. Okay, so actively connecting your community to its imagination stops those SDGs being the sort of ephemeral, kind of just floaty global headlines, and turn them into access points for any community. Because Tiffany and I were talking earlier, there is great wealth next to great poverty in every country. The USA, in Switzerland, in the UK, in Africa, as a continent, in Asia. This is not something new to us. So these goals and their targets aren't just about these developing countries. These now apply to every community. Every community deserves to have these goals solved. Now, the deadline, these goals are supposed to be reached by 2030. Okay, and we have 10 years to solve the problem, and COVID has given us a bigger trigger than ever to figure out how we can create flourishing lives. Okay, so we start with the why of we need to be thinking about libraries at the heart of communities and at the heart of climate action. And it comes back to the 3 principles of connecting people to their imagination, giving them the skills to find answers, and amplifying their voices about a flourishing community and what they want for their futures. So very briefly, we can't predict the future, but we can unfold it. That is the principle of futures thinking. Okay, and that becomes, for me, that's incredibly hopeful, because it means that we can, in any darkness, we can make a decision to change things, within ourselves, within our community. And it comes from actively using our imagination, our creativity to do that. If you can't imagine it, you can't create it. And that is the role that libraries fundamentally create and allow and enable and empower in a community to do. So in futures thinking, we also look at 10 years. So 2030 is a very useful horizon for us. And what we say is we also want multiple perspective. It takes a community to imagine differently. All those different perspectives are like little facets of a prism, all trying to problem solve. And that's innovation and invention and all of those buzzwords. They come from this starting point of learning how to have ideas, which is this central remit of what libraries are there to do. So when we, here's an example from a UN activity that I did back in 2018, and we sent it out to young people. We were saying, you know, what will the future look like? It's you have to reimagine it. Use your imagination to reimagine it. There are no wrong ideas as long as there's no harm to people or planet. So effectively, futures thinking, we can think of shadow futures, and we can also think of positive futures and transformational futures. So we want to see all of those things to try and understand what the impact will be across systems, as well as to be able to choose, therefore, which are the ones that we want. So quite often I will set an innovation challenge, however, which is how can you do things differently by reimagining from this point? What will the future look like if we reverse engineer from this scenario back to 2030? Back to where we are now, sorry. Okay, and when we're doing this imagining, when we're thinking about these things, when we're playing with futures thinking and playing with ideas, what we're doing is actually using the design process, and it's connecting us through that process to resilience and to well-being. As the heart of design thinking and the heart of imagining, you have to let go of things and reframe failure as a release and back into creativity. So you start to loop and go upwards because you're really building that essence of creativity and creative thinking into people. And what futures thinking allows us to do is also involve the whole community. So I'm talking a lot about youth, but it involves any age group. And actually the really important thing about futures thinking is it is intergenerational. So as long as it's a safe space that you're holding people in the library, then, and safeguard is in place for all of the people there, whatever age, then you're inviting the whole community to imagine the future. Okay, so I'm conscious of time, so I'm whizzing through. So we're unfolding the future, and this is something that some children created for me because they'd been to a workshop and we had done this futures thinking exercise around a challenge, a problem that they were in love with, a problem around how can we make our school greener and how can we save the planet that way, starting locally. So the first element that I want to take you through, a very practical session, and this is recorded, so, and you'll be able to see the screenshot, is simply to ask your community, what is the future of X? What is the future of libraries? You can do it with your library staff. What is the future of local gardening? What is the future of air in our community? Whatever the topic is, whether you select it or whether you invite them to share any topic that they care about, you're literally leaving it that open to think about what is the future of your topic. And then that is great to have on a board, so you actually seeing it and visualizing what is the future of air, what is the future of jobs in our community, etc., etc., is moving in itself. So we look at actually first we look at the drivers of change. What are the drivers of change, big change, that are happening on that topic? So the impact of COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement, gender equality, all of these are super important, and they're big drivers of change at lots of different levels. So we want to see those and recognize them and think, well, what impact would they have on that future? You then invite your community to look, or your session, and say, well, based on that topic, what changes are we actually seeing right now in that topic? So, you know, in a shadow future, a great one is the digital divide in education right now, probably in your community, which is preventing kids out of school because of COVID, not being able to go back to school just yet. What is happening right now is, if you can't get onto any device, if you can't cross or bridge the digital divide, what will your future look like? So we're seeing globally, particularly for girls, if they are out of education, they are more at risk of child marriage, sexual abuse, FGM, all of these issues, which will stop them ever accessing education again. If that happens in any country, what will 2030 look like? And it's going to look even more catastrophic than it does now. So these are really important things to think about. So when you're thinking about sustainability in your community, it is about the environment, and it's about the economics, and it's about the social, and it's about the human element that is in that community. This is a great way of looking at some of the challenging topics which are going on around climate action in your community. And it's important to differentiate when we talk about climate change. Climate change is the thing that's happening, it's the driver. Climate action is the signal which will help us to, and the activities that will help us to move forward into these equitable futures, flourishing communities, flourishing planet. We call it planet and people-centered design. So using this futures gaming, playing with ideas, enables everyone to take part and simply explore and imagine and wonder. So you can do things like ask them to describe their preferred future just in a few lines. What's the one that they want for themselves? And in doing that, what you do is generate positive emotions, hope, joy, gratitude. You actually get them to ground their hope into something 10 years out. So 1 year out, 10 years out, what would it look like? What is the future that you want? And then getting them to describe what an artifact from that future might actually look like. A book, a diary, a piece of clothing, and that's a really fun exercise to do. So it helps you, to create a display in the library, and all of that is creating this exploration that is really grounding for your community to think of. When you think of the future, you get to unfold it. And we need to move our communities through the resources and the tools that libraries give us into this really special space of giving communities their voice back. If we can give them back wonder, if we give them back imagination, we are setting them on the start of entrepreneurship journeys. We're setting them on the start of informal education. We are getting them to change the status quo in order that they can be part of the solution. So all that stuff going on down in Silicon Valley, every single thing that happens there starts with somebody having an idea. And that is what futures thinking is about. So the steps for getting there is, the next stage for helping people to actually realize their ideas, getting them to use a grid like this, which is, what did you say about the future? So what can you do today? What could you do in a few weeks or months? And what could be your long-term set of activities? Okay, so I've just got a couple of minutes to wrap up. Don't hesitate to be in touch with me, Elaine at flowinaction.org, to explore more, ask me some questions, see how I could help you guys individually. And I think it's super important to ground this with two inspirational figures. Nelson Mandela said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." You can work with communities to imagine and unfold futures which are equitable, futures for all. It always seems impossible till it's done, but it always starts with one step and one idea. Not a perfect idea, nothing is ever perfect. It's always just a whole process. And the very last word from Maya Angelou, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Sorry, forget the typo there. The more you use, the more you have. That is our job, to give access to these resources, to bring these voices and these ideas and this connection to people's creativity, to their imagination, so that we build their skills and amplify their voices into that realization of the 4 pillars of sustainability. Okay, so I'm going to stop that there. Tiffany, are there any questions that I might have missed?
I'm looking through the chat. I don't see any questions so far.
Okay, that's great. Well, so I keep everyone on track so they can get to the next session. Please don't hesitate to be in touch on LinkedIn or ping me an email. And I'm conscious that I've whizzed through everything, and I'm really happy to talk about it individually.
I do see one question. The question is, can you share your presentation? And this is from Tori.
Yes, it's it will have recorded on the screen, so that gets recorded and then it goes up on the website tomorrow, I think. So you'll see that. You'll be able to see what I was scrolling through. Okay. Anything else?
No, that is it so far.
Okay, so I believe that is the end of my time slot. Is that right, Tiffany?
That is correct.
Okay. So I'm going to stop the share and look at all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining me and spending the time. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Renee, to everyone. Thank you. And I'm just so, it's so special. I was saying to Tiffany, I have talked and talked and talked about this stuff for a long time now, and finally meeting you guys and in this conference, we are a tribe, and we are a very big tribe, and we are very powerful. Revolutions start with ideas, and we are the gentle, quiet, but very powerful revolution. Give a book to somebody and they find their voice, you get to guide them forward, and it's a very sacred space to be in. Okay, in that, sadly, I would love to talk to every one of you, but I'm going to have to end it there. Okay, so I'll end it for everyone. Wishing you all good luck, stay safe and well, and look forward to being in touch with you all again soon.